let's have a look at some major results and lessons that one can take away from some of these studies using some of the approaches that I just mentioned. Let me say, first of all, religion is not the most frequent object of research in the relevant studies, but it looks that especially in Arabic hate speech, religion plays a crucial role. And if one, however, looks at hate speech from the European Union, for example, from different countries there are other targets, and these other targets often are even more prominent in hate speech than religion is. And if it is religion, of course, it's for the most part always Islam. A study on the framing of Muslims on the Spanish internet. Here there was a big newspaper corpus that was investigated. The investigators looked at frequent collocations, lexical neighbors, whatever you want to call this, using corpus linguistic tools. And the adjective Islamic is frequently used with violent concepts such as terrorism. And this, of course, indicates a conceptual continuity between terrorism and Islam. So that terrorism is clearly part of the framing conveyed by the word Islamico in Spanish. And on the next slide, you then see that there are two main messages that the authors take away from this study. First of all, the negative framing that links Muslims to terrorism. And secondly, an interesting difference between the adjectives Islamico and Musulman. It's also Islamic and Muslimic in other countries. So Islamico has clearly this negative framing, but Musulman or Muslimic is in fact neutral or even used in positive frames. So these two are really different with regard to the frames in which they occur. And in fact, when Islamico appears together with Musulman or Arabic in Spanish, then the framing becomes neutral. So it's an interesting difference. And in fact, this was found also in many other European countries that in fact, Islamic is much more negatively framed than, for instance, Muslimic. This is just one thing that we can learn, that we have a stigmatization of Muslims in Spain, and this is something that is considered to be a dangerous sign and something that may escalate into hate speech and hate crime in Spain. There was a study where specifically Arabic Twitter sphere was investigated. So here 6,000 tweets were investigated, 1,000 tweets for each of the 6 religious groups, and this was Jews, Christians, atheists. We had also Sunni and Shia distinguished. Now, first of all, what is interesting is that about 50% of the discussions about religion in Arabic Twitter sphere is about hate towards religious groups. This is far higher than in any other Twitter sphere that has been investigated so far. And especially this hate is directed towards Jews and atheists. Next slide. And well, I mean, essentially the next 2 slides also illustrate this. So I just wanted to give this as one example where sentiment analysis, for instance, it was applied to the analysis of specifically Arabic hate speech tweets. The 2 projects that I briefly mentioned, the EU project, the Contact one and the Farm one, they have even as part of their mission that they provide also instruments for counter hate speech, and then also to fine-tune the mechanisms for detecting hate speech. And this is in fact what we find in many of these other projects that are also represented by using these big data automatic analysis devices. Well, I think this is really part of the funding strategy also of the EU. If the relevant projects are funded, that it is expected that this can then also feed back into hate speech detection mechanisms. And I think this is very subtle. Of course, You have to refine this more and more. I mean, I talked about the difference between soft and hard hate speech. So all these things that are hidden, okay, all those things where you need perhaps approaches that tell you more about how you may not express something literally, but you may mean it. You may mean more than what you're literally saying. I think you will increasingly also find mechanisms that and tools to train the software to spot this.